Tonight, we get to welcome Patrick Bolan. Patrick is licensed call sign KJ7ZSU. He is the owner of Geochron. And I know that many of you have heard of that, but if you haven't, we're going to hear all about it. And we're privileged to have him on. And I'm not going to say much more because I'm sure he's going to explain it a lot more interestingly than I can. So Patrick, welcome to the W0TLM group, and we're glad to have you.
Hey everybody, I'm Patrick with Geochron. I'm the owner of Geochron, and happy St. Patrick's Day to you. So thank you for being here. I am going to talk. I got a bunch of slides to go through, and you'll be surprised at how much material I can get in my allotted time. And so I'm going to just start out. I am coming to you from my little PowerPoint, which is across from Vancouver, Washington. I'm over across the river from Portland, Oregon, across the Columbia River in Vancouver, and working out of my home office. And I've got finished up dinner, so it feels good. It's warm in my belly. We had big Irish stew, so yes. So here I am in my shack, but my favorite thing to do is to travel all over the country as the owner of Geochron and to visit people who own Geochrons. And in this way, here I am parked out in front of ARRL, and to do this on my motorcycle. So when I went to Massachusetts, of course, I went to the installation at MIT of the Geochron Digital, and they also have a Geochron mechanical clock. And then for those of you who are super into solar weather, you'll know Dr. Tamitha Skov, the space weather lady on YouTube and various platforms. And so she's a big Geochron fan. I met up with her a couple months ago down in Southern California, and she is as smart as she sounds. She's super, she's like an uber human. But most of the people that I visit are like David here, who is outside Athens, Georgia. He's a retired hospital administrator and an ardent ham radio dude. And so I spent the night in his house. They have parrots, they have dogs, and then I sat down and talked to his Elmers at 7:30 in the morning, and it was super cool. What a great community this has been to sort of develop the Geochron Digital that I'm going to be talking about here in just a minute. But before I get there, I am also the owner of the Mechanical Clock Company. And so since 1964, Geochron Mechanical has been making a mechanical clock, and we still make this today. Here I am in Louisville, Kentucky. So the mechanical clock, for those of you who have been around a long time, you'll know that it shows the gray line in real time. And before the internet, it was the only way to know where the gray line was without like opening up a logbook. But this is a machine. It's 37 pounds. It hangs on the wall. It's expensive. It has all these gears and cool stuff. And that's what I inherited when I bought the company 10 years ago. You can see here that this clock is in a current configuration that is approaching the equinox, which is, by the way, on Thursday of this week. So that the lines are the terminator lines, which we call the bows. They are straight up and down, but over time they flex back and forth, and then the map moves around at 1 inch an hour for 3 days. The map is 6 feet long, because that's what 24 times 3 is, and in inches, and then creates this beautiful mechanical clock. And so that particular mechanical version has been featured in lots of different movies, including The Hunt for Red October. And so here's James Earl Jones sitting in front of the Hunt for Red October on some battleship somewhere. And as a matter of fact, when I was in Alabama a couple of months ago, I stayed with Captain Nick. And Captain Nick was the captain of the frigate that the Hunt for Red October was filmed on. And here he is with his Geochron. So again, just like it's just the coolest community ever. So I stayed in his guest house. You know, he has all kinds of projects, and he's got a boat and that he's working on that he'll probably never finish, and it's just so cool. So this is part of the fun for me. The old guy in this picture is Dr. James Kilberg, and he's the one that invented the Geochron 60 years ago. And no, that would be. Yeah, no. Oh boy, I'm bad at math. Okay, 60 years ago. And but the youngest guy in the picture is his son, and he passed the machine shop that makes the mechanical clock onto his son. And I bought that. Eventually, the shop came to me 10 years ago. And then President Ronald Reagan, who had a Geochron from his time when he was a governor in California, he gave a Geochron to Prime Minister Gorbachev when he came across the ocean after the fall of the Iron Curtain as a diplomatic gift, as an example of American ingenuity. And back in the day, the Geochron mechanical clock really was all that. So articles that you see about Geochron, like this one from Wired magazine, that look backwards, they're checking out all the cool people that had mechanical Geochrons. I spend most of my time working on the digital version, which I invented I don't know, maybe 7 years ago now, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. But I am super proud to tell you that the mechanical clock that still exists today through this shop is still open. We refurbish about 300 mechanical Geochrons, and we build about 50 to 100 new ones. They're built to order. They're expensive. They're like $2,000 to $4,000, and maybe $1,500 to get one restored. These parts aren't at Home Depot. They're all custom made. But how many mechanical oddities have passed away? But Geochron Mechanical continues to survive, and a lot of that's because of I'm sitting here and I've got a mechanical and I love it, and I don't want to see the shop go down. And also because so many other people are in my same boat. They've had it on their wall for 30 years, and it would be a pity to see that the only shop that would work on them would disappear. So it did not. It exists today, so I'm super happy about that. And man, cool stuff happens. So here's in Dallas, Texas. This is an attorney's office, his home office. And on one wall, he's got a Geochron mechanical clock. And on the other one, he's got a digital. And so this is kind of where the company has went. We started in mechanical, still do the mechanical, and now we're into digital, and that's kind of my wheelhouse. So the best presentations that I do are ones where people ask me questions and just shout it out. They're like, hey, what about this and what about that? And so I'm going to pause here for a moment. Does anybody have any questions about the mechanical clock before I move into what's going on with the digital these days? Anybody? All right. All right. I'm going to go once.
Quick question.
Sure. Hi, Jonathan.
Yeah, the world's not flat. So what did you do? How did you deal with that?
Yeah, sure. So we are the Mercator projection that we use is special for Geochron. You can't see it, but outside my office here on the in the hallway, there is a custom map that has handwriting all over it, and it is an original Mercator projection where we've cut off the longitudinal lines to fit where most of humanity is, and that's the longitudinal and Mercator projection that we showed on the mechanical clock, and the digital clock, because that's what we had to work with, is exactly the same parameter as that. So it does have a problem in that you're trying to get a bunch of data in the digital world into the two-dimensional surfaces, and there's just way too much data to fit onto a flat screen. But this is just, until we come up with like a holographic Geochron, which would be fantastic. This is what we have to work with. Other questions? All right, cool. Let me move on. So,
We have a question.
okay, all right.
Our room mic just isn't picking him up.
Patrick, where is your shop? Where are you building and doing the maintenance repair on on the Geochrons?
Yeah. So the question is, where is the shop of the mechanical shop? The mechanical shop is in Colorado Springs. So it's been there for 2 years. So I ran that machine shop for 8 years. While I was working on the digital simultaneously, and finally I couldn't do both. So whereas I'm located in the Pacific Northwest, and all my people for Geochron Digital are, the mechanical shop is being looked after by the Matsons, who own a legit clock shop, and honestly, they are better at it than I am because they already knew how to work on mechanical clocks. If you, I don't know if you have like old clocks in your house that you need to get fixed, but it's increasingly difficult to find people who will work on a mechanical clock because they're all retired. It's a lost art. Kids aren't learning it. And so they tell me that if you want a home visit in Colorado, like from like, oh, my grandfather clock, I don't want to send it in, you're on a year-long wait list to get that done so they run a shop and they have precious skill set, and they're applying that to the Geochron mechanical clock in Colorado Springs. Other questions? Cool. All right. Well, let me tell you a little about digital. So what happened was I bought the company and then I ran out of money. So this is where the story ends. This is I don't know if you've ever opened up your bills and you had this much in bills and you had this much money, but that is exactly what happened at Geochron Mechanical. And for years, people have been telling me, why don't you make a digital version? And I'm like, no, no, the mechanical's fantastic. You should really stick with that. Don't you feel the mechanical charisma of this? Well, it wasn't paying. So we cleared a wall in the machine shop. I hired a friend of mine, Tegan, who was a developer, and we thought, how can we make this digital? Because we really need a new product around here. Otherwise, we're going to go down, and Geochron will be lost forever. And so what we did, and over the course of about a year, was we made an atlas that was on the screen, and it's like the exact same maps that we were using to print the maps, like the same files that we were using to print the mechanical clock. But then we started to add stuff. And so I'm going to talk the rest of the time about all the stuff we added to the digital. If you've ever seen like the movie Toy Story, one guy is like Woody, and then there's Buzz Lightyear. Well, this is definitely Buzz Lightyear. It's cheaper and it's all that. So this is this is what we made, and this is how it's put together. It's a little computer that attaches to your 4K TV. The problem we had was, how do you provide a configurable 4K image, like a map with the layers all that you want to see, but have that not streaming? Because if you showed it full time, your internet service provider would be streaming at 20 gigabytes an hour, and you would exceed your quota for the month. I mean, because that's like watching Netflix 24/7, as most of our customers do. They have the map on all the time. So what we did was we put it into a computer where the maps were in the computer, the processing power to combine the maps with live data was in the computer, and then we send the live data to the unit. And so that is by rendering on the user side, we're not using 20 gigabytes an hour. We're using just 20 or 30 megabytes an hour. And so that's how the Atlas is put together. So like, for example, when I'm here at my desk, I take it out, you see that there's the computer. It's actually an Intel quad-core x86. This is not a simple little Raspberry Pi that you might use for controlling your antennas. This really needs a little more horsepower than that to be able to render in 4K. It's putting together that image at maybe 3 frames a second, 4 frames a second in 4K, and we're really working it. So that plugs into the HDMI and TV, and then it's fanless, it's totally quiet. It's a modern computer, no RF to speak of, and then you can control it from the remote, or you can control it from a remote app on your phone, which I'll talk about here in a bit. So using that solution of having a remote computer that then receives live data, it's gone some really cool places. Like, for example, this is the second largest cruise ship in the world, the Princess of the Seas by Cardinal Lines, and that is the bridge of the ship, and there is the Geochron on the back wall. So that came to me from Galveston, Texas, about 2 years ago. There's astronaut Scott Kelly from his home office in Colorado. That's clearly a Geochron behind him, and he and I have actually had some conversations back and forth about what the Geochron is all about. And he was like, "This is really great. It reminds me of being on the ISS," which I'm never going to get to the ISS, but I think that's a great compliment. So what we made here in real time looks like this. This is actually a live image of the Geochron in my office behind me that I'm screen capturing here for you. So what I'm seeing right now is that 12 meters is very hot between Japan and North America. Also 10 meters. People are hitting 10 meters as well. I see that between South America and North America, and within North America, 20 meters is very hot. The International Space Station just passed over the New Zealand, and those orange circles that you see, well, those are earthquakes that have happened in the last 24 hours. A lot of this other stuff should look familiar, including like live radar, and you see lightning strikes that are happening over Brazil right now. That's what those little shiny things are. Now I'm looking at this in 4K for me, but for you, you're just on a Zoom call, and so it's much more glittery and pretty in person when it has quadruple the number of pixels to check it out with. So let me describe kind of what the other things that we're putting on there. So I mentioned the International Space Station, but we have a picture-in-picture view of the International Space Station. So here in this little graphic that I put together, it's going over Brazil, and I'm looking at the coast of Brazil, shining down 260 miles from the cupola from a camera mounted on the International Space Station. And to see that all together in real time, that's pretty magical. I mentioned the earthquakes. In the Colorado region and down into the Permian Basin, we're seeing more earthquakes, and that's because fracking is occurring in those areas where they take seawater and they inject it down into the mantle of the earth, and then that pushes up the petroleum or the oil. And so I think it's really cool that causes earthquakes. I think it's really cool that you could see that on a Geochron. And then all the flights. So right now I'm showing Delta Airlines, but if I jump over here to my live Geochron, you see a lot of white dots that are over North America. Those are all the current positions of Alaska Airlines. They have 140 flights in the sky right now out of 10,023 commercial flights that are being tracked in some way on the Geochron through our provider, planefinder.net. And then, hold on. And then weather. Well, we spent a lot of time on weather because maps are great for weather. So here, 2 years ago, we had 3 hurricanes that were happening in the Atlantic Ocean, and we had 3 typhoons that were happening in the Pacific Ocean. But this year was no less interesting. So here we have Hurricane Beryl that's barreling into Texas. And the particular view I'm using, this overlay is the geosatellite image overlay. So this is actually a picture of the Earth within the last 60 minutes of when when it appeared on the Geochron, overlaid with cloud cover, which you can see, but also overlaid with the digital radar. If you see little yellow spots over California, those are earthquakes that were happening at the same time. I mean, the Earth is so active. And then also you see all those airline flights, and I'm not sure which one I had up at the time. It's been cut off, but that's been super interesting as well. You may know that the fire in the Pacific Palisades that happened in California here about 2 months ago. So on January 8th, you could see those little red dots. That comes from a NASA satellite called the FIRMS satellite, which is trying to identify hotspots on the Earth, the probable location of fires. And you can see that the area of like Malibu into northern Los Angeles, that is just lit up with red dots. But then it's the pollution, and this is the PM 2.5 layer, which means particulates that are under 2.5 microns. But you can see it that the winds, the Santa Ana winds, are carrying it over the Pacific Ocean. And then by January 9th, it's further. By January 10th, it is a conflagration. And that wasn't brush, that was toxic building smoke stuff. And it's really cool that you can see that on the Geochron. And then also with weather, there's radar time lapse, like you see on the news, or the weather's coming over, or maybe on your phone. I mentioned the ocean temperatures. Well, I mentioned the lightning, but we have ocean temperatures. That's what that red is around Brazil, and how you can see that the Atlantic Ocean is much warmer than the Pacific Ocean. And so we do have a fair number of mariners that get this because they're always interested what's going on in the ocean. And then just here about a month ago, we rolled out the coolest layer ever, which was my little thing. I'm like, can we please get this done? So this is a close-up of the partly of Southeast Asia, and of course it's just a close-up of what was the whole map. But you can see that these are live aircraft carrier locations. So the Charles de Gaulle is just getting done with the deployment in the South China Sea, and right now it's as of today, I'm looking over online. It is it's docked in Cambodia. And then the American Assault Response Group is up there in Japan, along with the George Washington Carrier Strike Group. And the Chinese carriers, which don't go out very often because they're in some stage of building, they're all lined there on the coast. But we're also watching Indian carriers. We're watching the Russian carriers if it's in the news. And I don't have any kind of particular angle on where the carriers are. I just read the news, and then we make a layer for that once a week as to the approximate position of where these carriers are. Super cool. Super cool. Like, that's what I'm trying to do at Geochron, is to make it a living world map, right? And to look at the maximum extension of power of large countries, of military power. It gives you an idea of where the hotspots are. So if you know anything about Taiwan, there's a hotspot coming. That's why they're all there. And then there got to be so many layers that we had to make an app for it. So everybody's normally just like using these remote control up, down, left, right to control the menu on the screen. But with so many layers, we put it together in an app, which is much faster. The app is a browser, so it'll work on your Android, it'll work on Apple, it'll work on the browser on your Shack computer. And it's a much easier way to operate all the different layers on the Geochron. So before I get into ham radio stuff, does anybody have any questions for me? Any questions? All right, going once, going twice. Good. You know, another thing I didn't mention, and I'm going to use my live Geochron to demonstrate here, is just last week we rolled out a new feature. you can see that we are approaching the equinox on Thursday. And so the installation line, the gray line of the sun, is equidistant just about between the northern and the southern hemisphere. But if I jump over here to layers and go down to twilight mode, we just introduced all the major twilights. That would be civil, nautical, and astronomical. And so now you can see the gradients of those twilights. Where it just starts to get gray, which is right now approaching Nevada, that's where the sun is setting. But as we all know as humans, it's not dark when the sun sets. It goes through time. That's what these different things are. And I got to tell you, every year people call us up and say, oh, my Geochron's broken or the mechanical's broken because what happened to the sun line? It's just straight up and down now. Nope. That's just celestial mechanics. That's how the world works. That's called the equinox. That happens twice a year. Every single year. Were there any questions out there? Okay, good. Let's talk about ham radio. So, at the end of every year, we have a contest of who's got the coolest picture. And in 2023, this guy from Toronto, Canada won. And what a great picture that is. So, of course, the Geochron is the blingiest thing. But when people walk into the shack and they look at all that equipment, your visitors don't even know what all that is. But they look at the map and they're like, oh, I get that. And then that is the tool that you use to explain what you're doing in the middle of the night or on Saturday morning. And so this is one of the great ways to use the Geochron. And man, I love these pictures when they come in. So the way we put together the ham radio part of the Geochron is we started with a ham radio map. And then we added geocentric projection, FT8 Whisper, a lot like PSK Reporter. In fact, we pull from the same database. And so you can see these great circle routes of live transmissions that are going on. You could add call signs, although it makes it look pretty cluttered. And then you can interpret those great circle routes, lines between the continents or within continents, by looking at the band below and seeing what color it is. And so like 10 meters is pink, and 2 meters is another pink, and 40 meters is blue, and so on. But putting it all together, you can see that some dude is going in Vancouver, British Columbia, probably. It's going crazy on 10 meters. And it's raining where you see the green. You can see the AMSAT satellites, and there's a footprint of one that's off the coast of Chile. That's WA20. I can't quite read it. KW20. XW20, I think. You can see that there have been earthquakes that are occurring off the coast of Malaysia. And then the Earth, where the gray line is, and then what the Earth looks like from a satellite. And you can see little specks where those cities are. Moscow stands out to me as I'm looking at this. But this is the magic of the map. And then moving on, you can see it all in motion. If you live with it, you begin to see it this way. Now, this is kind of speeding up, but you can see those satellites moving around. You can see different routes that are heading out, like from the west coast to Hawaii. People are making the trip. In fact, they're making it right now as I'm looking at my map. And if you're a QRZ subscriber, you can get this. You can put your logbook on there too to see where show everybody where you've been. And then, of course, like with every picture that I get of a shack, if they got their ham sign prominently displayed. So this is K3LR. If you probably know, that's Tim Duffy. He's a big fan. He's got 3 of these and 3 mechanicals, I think. And that is a shack that I would like to visit someday. I have not yet been there. That would be pretty cool. Also, some cool stuff. Like this is this is the moon terminator and the sublunar point. So just like the analemma, which is that figure 8 that you always see on the map, is showing the subsolar point of the sun between the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn, the moon follows a different pattern. And when I took this picture, the apparent sublunar point of the moon was directly over Australia, and the pink is where it's shining right now. This is not right now in this moment today, but this is just when I took the picture. But this feature is always available on the Geochron if you're into the moon. And that should look familiar, courtesy of Paul Herman. And that should look familiar, courtesy of NOAA with Aurora Forecast. That also is Paul Herman. That should look familiar. And now we get into maximum usable frequency. So this is a great way to illustrate this. I'm sitting here on the West Coast, and at the time I took this screenshot, the maximum usable frequency was 20 megahertz. 20 meters, sorry. Nope, 20 megahertz. So if I wanted to get Japan, I would follow the lines, and I would go over from 20, and then I know the Great Circle route takes me through Alaska. I'd go from 20 to 17 and then down into 18 once I got to Japan. And so the maximum usable frequency would be 17 megahertz. And if I went any higher than that, it would bounce off to the ionosphere. And those little green circles, those are the actual location of ionospheric radars that are shooting straight up into the ionosphere. And as soon as it doesn't bounce back, that's the maximum usable frequency. Above that, and your signal goes off into space. And so the maximum usable frequency working together with the ionosphere is like a big soup of radiation, reflectivity, and magnetism that is powered by the sun. And so you can look at it sort of in this multicolored way, which is pretty cool on the Geochron, but it illustrates a problem that the Geochron has. And that is there's too much stuff. So we're a Mercator projection in a two-dimensional world. And so in this image, I'm looking at, okay, I'll just call it out here. I see the International Space Station, ionospheric radars, maximum usable frequency, solar conditions, solar weather, planetary locations, precipitation, storms, earthquakes are not up here. I see the Hubble Space Telescope in purple, and then I also see a lot of DXing that's going on. But I can't even tell. I can't even tell where the continents are. And so to try to manage that problem, because I'm not going to stop adding layers, is we add on, off, and sliders. So these are opacity sliders. You can set it between 0 and 100 to bring the layer in or to bring it out as you wish. Or you can just turn it off altogether. So the Geochron can't play all 85 layers simultaneously. But what you can do is put together your own particular mix of what you'd like to see, and then save it to a configuration profile. So you can, like, every 5 minutes I want to see weather, every 5 minutes I want to see ham radio, and you can rotate that through so the Geochron can give you maximum awareness about what's going on in the rest of the planet. And putting it all together, another great way to do this is by making the map grayscale. And that makes the colored layers, the live layers, pop better. So these are AMSAT satellites that are running around. The International Space Station just came through New Zealand right there. And I see planes moving around, but really it's a busy world. And again, that's what I'm trying to demonstrate with the Geochron is we just get stuck in our phones all the time, doom scrolling to nowhere. But if you take in your information through a map, it gives you a context of where you belong in the world and sort of unlocks, I don't know, a little bit of optimism that you're not alone. And so I really like that about the Geochron. It's not just moving down into, like my little silo, but it's a map. And so that's why that's my vision for the company, is to create a living map where we all kind of feel like we're a little bit more part of the planet. You know what I'm saying? So that's how that goes. Just a moment. So the big question that I get is, what does this cost? But before I move into that, I'm just going to break out again for questions if you have them. So I just covered a ton of stuff with layers and stuff like that. You'd be good if you caught half of it. Do you have any questions for me before we get into the little last part of this?
Patrick, can you hear me?
I cannot. Sorry. I'll give you wherever the microphone is and get closer.
Okay. So, in the interest of even more data, do you have a facility where additional georeference maps could be added to Geochron? Or is that a capability that you're thinking of adding later, if not currently?
Okay. So my understanding is the question was, can you get more maps on there? Was that right?
Yeah, if an individual has some georeference data, is there an ability to add that?
Okay.
Independent of the subscription Geochron?
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So I'll answer that as much as I could hear it. So it is not possible for users to add their own maps. And it's not very possible it's difficult. If you're a developer, you might be able to use, you can contact support. There is a backdoor for you to add your own data if you wanted to put it over the top of the map. One thing I have not mentioned in the presentation is that there are other maps that I have not been showing you. And so, like, I'm going to jump over here to, if I go to Zoom, so we have different zoomed regions. Like, I'm going to jump in here to Europe and see what's cooking in Europe at the moment. So it'll take a second for that to render up as we look at that. So here's Europe. The sun is beginning to rise in Europe. This is the Earth at night, overlaid with solar weather, aurora. and then weather will come up here shortly. And there it goes. And then, wow, look how it's just constrained to the land. Isn't that cool? There's not a lot of weather. So, and some snow. So anyways, there are other maps that are available, but they are magnifications of the maps that are global. So I hope that answers your question. Okay, good. Are there other questions? Cool. All right, here we go. So the big question is like, what does this cost? So Geochron is separated into two separate groups. You got to have the platform because this is the computer that stitches everything together. And so with the coupon that I give for you tonight, have for you tonight here at the end, you will get better than show pricing. And then what's included are all the global maps, the time, the gray line, all the aviation, and the 16 additional layers that just come to you just by plugging it into the internet. And I will send that out to every Geochron forever. And for our specific audiences like ham radio, that are for information that it costs me money to get. So then we have a small charge that we pass on in a subscription way. Let me describe what the difference is between included and what's in premium. So included is what, if you just plug it into the internet, I'm just going to try it out. And I will send that data to every Geochron that's out there. This is an example of a map that is working on layers, live layers that are of what's included. So that would be like I'm seeing weather, I'm seeing precipitation, cloud cover, the ISS, different maps. This happens to be the topographical map, and also aviation is included with that. If I went to say like the weather package, that would look like this. I'm seeing earthquakes, and I'm seeing a lot more detail where it's the blue is snow, the green is rain, and just much better. But I pay for that. I don't have an antenna on my roof that grabs that information. I have to buy it from a data source. In the ham radio world, this would be free. If you just plugged it in, you'd have the gray line, you'd have the cool ham radio maps, you'd see satellites. All the satellites are trackable, all 40,000 of them, and all the aviation stuff. But if I went to the ham radio package, now we're into maximum usable frequency. We're into all of the stuff that you might see on PSK Reporter. And I'm not saying that you can't have 40 browser windows open on your computer and not be able to find the same information. The Geochron is just putting this all together for you in a non-ad supported way onto a giant 4K screen. So for me to get that data, that costs money. And so that's why there are premium layers. Otherwise, we'd go out of business in 2 weeks. So, for example, here's North America, looking at some of that cool ham radio stuff and also weather that's happening, aviation. And specifically, this is what's in the ham radio stuff. And if you're fast, you can just read down that list. I think it's all pretty self-explanatory to you guys because you've got licenses, you know what you're looking at. And then down there at the bottom, there are CQ and ITU zone maps and the Maidenhead grid too, for those of you who are contesters. Yeah. All right. So let me take my face off the screen, and here's another list. What's always included is the satellite weather and tracking and the satellites and stuff. We sell to a lot of schools, and so I don't want the schools to pay for that. I want some teenager to look at that map and go, no way. Right, so now I can see that in North America, the sunlight opens up and it warms up the water, and then it creates hurricanes, and then the hurricanes and the weather brings the rain over into the thing. You know, it takes a chapter in a weather book to tell you about that in a geoscience book, but it just takes 2 minutes with Geochron to understand that. And so that's what's always included. I want anybody to pick that up from what is on the map. The premium layers are on the right, and that would be the weather presets. That would be a bunch of ham radio stuff. The earthquakes and volcanoes are $2 a month. But if you were looking at Global Pass, so half of our customers will just be like, this is the coolest thing ever. I want all the data all the time. And so that is when we take all those packages and then we give you a big discount on it. And that's, at the moment, that's $11 a month and has been for the last 2 years. So $11 a month, and that's what we call the Global Pass. And that that's how the data comes to you, and also it reflects a little bit of the background of our company in that we have to pay for that data, so we are passing that on to you as well. But what the people do with that is pretty cool. This is the winner from 2022, And this is not a photoshopped ham shack. It actually looks like that. So I have talked to this guy, and we works for a low voltage cabling company north of Boise, and man, it looks great because I cannot see any cables. It looks so good. Like I wish that was my shack. So anyway, because you've listened to me go on about it, here's what I've got for you. Because the better than show pricing. So if you send an email to coupon@geochron.com, the system will automatically reply with a coupon code that you can use at geochron.com to get a coupon for $75 off of the hardware platform, for a free annual ham radio workstation, and you'll have it free for a year. And you could try any of those premium layers. They're all available by trial for at least a week. But if you get one from Geochron, you can have it for a year for the ham radio workstation. And of course, free shipping too. So that is how we put together the Geochron Digital. And since 1964, after building on the shoulders of the mechanical clock. So with that, does anybody have any questions for me? Here we go. I didn't hear it, but I heard laughing.
Patrick, this is Lauren. I appreciate all the information, and I think everybody is just wide-eyed looking at this, and it's been a bit of a fire hose.
Yeah, that's me.
Yeah. So, but everybody, I think, has been very appreciative of this. Question? While I'm standing close to the mic. It was, I mean, you did a great job of explaining what you're doing, and great imagery, and everybody's smiling, and
Good.
been grateful for your presentation.
Good. Well, thank you so much for having me. I always love doing clubs because people who are aware of the world and usually smart, those are ham radio people. So those are my people. I'm in the same boat with you. So thanks for having me.
Thanks very much.
All right.